It's been called America's car, the classic Ford Mustang with its instantly recognizable shape. The Classic is the first Mustang model made from the years 1964 through 1970, and as many as 1.5 million of these distinctive Mustangs are still cruising the highways. But as we first reported last spring, this proud American icon, now 35 years on the road, has a past that is not so well known and not so proud. A problem with the gas tank that may be responsible for injuries and deaths. Last summer, Harold Gilo was 16 and in love with a 32-year-old. A 32-year-old car, a classic Ford Mustang.
Ooh, look at this beautiful car.
Shut up, Harold.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, awesome car.
On July 15th, soon after this tape was made, Harold was driving the beloved 1966 Mustang in the rain. The car hydroplaned, spun across the center line, where an oncoming vehicle hit the Mustang in the rear.
The car was fully engulfed in flames. I mean, the flames are coming out the front window, the side windows.
Craig Jackson swerved around the skidding Mustang. A professional firefighter who has seen many car fires, Jackson was startled by the size of the exploding fireball in the Mustang.
I was going, why is this accident all of a sudden turning into a catastrophe like this? I still don't know what really happened.
Harold, at the wheel, was incinerated. The police say Harold was going faster than conditions would allow. Ford Motor Company says Harold panicked and was killed on impact. Harold's parents dispute that and point to a coroner's report saying not that their son was killed on impact, but that he burned to death in the Mustang fire.
I'm sure that Harold knew that we loved him, and I think we're fortunate in that, without a shadow of a doubt, we know he's in
the arms of Jesus. We know that.
But this is going to happen again unless people know about it.
What Liz and Harold Gilo Sr. learned was a secret about the classic Mustangs. The cars built from 1964 through 1970. For more than 30 years, fires erupting after crashes in the trunks of some classic Mustangs have spread into the passenger compartment. This American icon has left a trail of suffering and death. All across America, these old Mustangs are treasured so by so many people, they just won't let them go. In addition to the amazing number of Mustangs still on the road, there are many thousands off the road just waiting to be restored. From fields, from garages, from junkyards, classic Mustangs are being reclaimed, reconditioned, and returned to the nation's highways. And every one of them carries in the trunk a potentially deadly defect, says San Francisco attorney David Rand.
This right here is the gas tank. I'm going to climb in here.
He's representing the parents of Harold Gilo, and he's sued Ford before on the gas tank design. Because the top of the Mustang's tank is the floor of the trunk, Rand says terrible fires can erupt and spread inside the car.
And as you can see, the gas tank is right here, inches away from me, and the gas has a very wide opening to come right from the tank and directly into where the people are.
Ford has been sued more than 70 times by people burned in rear-end collisions of classic Mustangs. Most suits have been settled out of court without publicity.
I guess they felt that it'd be better to pay people off, give them money, than to recall the car.
We met many victims of classic Mustang fires. Marlo Aragon's accident happened in 1985. She was 15. A princess at her high school prom. In an instant, the fire in a 1967 Mustang burned away her fingers, much of her skin, her ears, and her hair.
Luckily, did I tell you how I got out?
The fire in Lisa Hutchinson's 1966 Mustang burned her vocal cords.
It was just like a garden hose and was spraying gasoline in there. And the
Peggy Beale's 1965 Mustang exploded in fire in 1972, leaving her with deep scars.
It's a classy-looking car, but it's a death trap.
In 1995, Ben Hodges survived a rear-end crash in a 67 Mustang. He would have walked away without a scratch, except for the burning gas that came into the passenger compartment and nearly killed him.
Before I was born, they knew about this car. Before I was born, there was people getting burned in this car.
Ford has refused repeated requests to appear on 60 Minutes 2 to discuss the history of fires in the 1964 through 1970 Mustangs. Ford says these were all high-speed crashes, and in a letter, Ford insists the fact that there are so many registered Mustangs, up to 1.5 million classics still on the road, is unassailable evidence of the design integrity and performance of this car line. In fact, there are no reliable statistics on fires erupting in these classic Mustangs. We requested our own expert analysis of U.S. government data on highway fatalities. The result, the death rate where fire occurred in rear-end Mustang crashes is more than 3 times higher than for all other cars of the same period. While Ford chose not to speak with us on camera about the classic Mustang, Lee Iacocca did. Former president of Ford Motor Company, Iacocca was known as the father of the Mustang when it debuted in 1964.
So people then said, wow, that's such a great buy. I'll go in now, I'll buy air conditioning, I'll buy a V8. And before you knew it, we were making nothing but money. I mean, it was rolling in. We were lucky. Timing.
Was safety a big factor in those days?
In those days, it was part of the specifications you laid out to the best of your ability, but it wasn't front and center. It wasn't the priority.
When the Mustang was designed, when you brought it to marketplace, you don't remember discussions about the fuel tank, per se?
Not one, in honesty, not one.
Don't remember anybody saying, look, this fuel tank may give us problems?
No. This is news to me. We built cars in that era to the best of our ability, what was available to make as good and safe a car as we could.
Iacocca says he is stunned by the suggestion that rear-end fires in classic Mustangs indicate the car is seriously flawed.
The reason I'm stunned is if you don't have that many successes in your life, to tell me that the Mustang had more problems or severity of problems than any other car in its class, or maimed or killed more people, to me is poppycock.
But it's not just poppycock to some of Ford's own safety engineers, who concluded early on there was a problem with the Mustang's fuel tank design.
It would clear the air to say, look, we goofed.
One of those engineers is Peter Bertelsen. He has never before spoken publicly about his years at Ford when the Mustang was marketed as a sports car Americans could afford.
It was supposed to be a low-price car, it was, and in order to make it lighter and less expensive, they did come up with this drop-in fuel tank.
The drop-in fuel tank. Ford was the only American manufacturer to use one before abandoning the design in 1971. On Mustangs built from 1964 through 1970, the gas tank was simply dropped into a hole in the trunk. If the tank is ruptured in a rear-end collision, there is no solid barrier, just a flimsy seat back between the passengers and the gasoline.
It's not a safe way to put fuel into an automobile.
To this day, Ford calls the system reliable and safe. But Bertelsen remembers there was early and widespread recognition at Ford of the dangers of the Mustang's fuel system.
I can say absolutely that all of the engineering executives were aware of the problems of the drop-in tank.
In 1966?
In 1966, yeah.
Plans were made to change future models, but the danger in the classic Mustang was never publicized.
Mustang from Ford.
Mustang sales soared, especially among baby boomers. Even the boomer in the White House owns a classic Mustang. Style sold cars, not safety, says Lee Iacocca, who insists he tried.
You said I'm the father of Mustang. I happen to think I'm the father of safety. I really went for it and took a beating at the time.
Iacocca did take a beating when he tried to sell cars that wouldn't start till the seat belts were fastened. Congress passed a law against that. But Iacocca also pushed all the way to the White House for a delay in federal safety standards. And in a meeting with President Nixon, he was recorded on the president's secret taping system, saying safety was killing the American car business.
I didn't know I was being taped at the time. How the hell would I know that?
You said shoulder harnesses and headrests are complete wastes of money. I'm reading out of the transcripts. Safety has really killed off our business.
We wanted to make sure we survived, so we talked differently then.
In building his case against Ford, attorney David Rand discovered film of a decades-old Mustang crash test.
They call it Crash Test 301. And they put a camera on top
Ford
of the back.
Crash Test 301. which he says shows unambiguously the danger of the drop-in gas tank.
Right, and here comes all the gasoline.
Ford says this 1966 test was very severe on a modified car designed to study occupant movement, not to evaluate the gas tank. But the camera looking from above down into the trunk shows the tank being crushed and gasoline spewing onto passengers.
And very clearly, this dummy's head is just being saturated with gasoline. All of this gasoline, if it had been ignited, would have definitely killed all of the people in the car.
Another element in the case against Ford. 30 years before Harold Gilo's fatal accident, a young Ford engineer named Sherman Henson wrote in 1968, warning his superiors, quote, "A fuel tank rupture during a rear-end collision would result in gasoline inside the vehicle."
Ford knew this accident was going to happen. They knew it 30 years ago, and they know it's going to happen again.
You are or are not flatly accusing Ford of suppressing the information?
I am flatly accusing them of that.
That has yet to be decided in court. Ford violated no laws or federal safety standards on the classic Mustang, but there was no safety standard on rear-end crashes back then, recalls Joan Claybrook, formerly the nation's top highway safety official.
So there was no government standard that covered it. It met all government standards, but there wasn't one that dealt with that problem.
In 1976, a year before Claybrook took over, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration reported classic Mustang fuel tanks, quote, present no fire hazard which does not also exist in other fuel tank systems, unquote. But Claybrook, now a consumer advocate, believes Ford passed by withholding from investigators its own crash test 301.
Ford knew and never told the Department of Transportation during the course of this investigation that when the car was hit in the rear and the fuel tank came forward, fuel could spew out into the passenger compartment.
You say Ford knew but didn't tell the Department of Transportation.
That's correct. They had a crash test that they conducted, and it was withheld from the Department of Transportation.
Department records show Ford's Test 301 was not submitted, but Ford officials maintain they were fully responsive and that 301 was not designed to test fuel tank integrity and not relevant to the safety of the drop-in tank. Why would they not fix it?
They hated recalling cars, particularly then, and Lee Iacocca, who was president of Ford, loved that car. He helped to design it. And so they didn't ever want to admit that they had a problem with their best car on the road.
Lee Iacocca insists he was never told of problems with the drop-in tank and says, don't blame the automakers because old cars do not have the same safety equipment as new ones.
To me, it's almost asinine to say, anything that grows old, you got to turn back the clock and make good on that. But technology, what the hell would you do with a black and white TV set today? You'd throw it away.
But there are repairs that could be made, say Harold Gilo's parents, and Ford could inform people of dangers learned about the classic Mustang.
They did know there was a problem with the car. They knew that based on their own test, based on their own safety engineers, and they did nothing about it. They didn't warn people.
Liz Gilo wants Ford to warn people now.
Maybe some other little boy or girl will grow up, go to college, get married, have children. Harold never will do that. He'll never do that.
The family has not yet sued Ford, but is on a safety campaign to get people out of classic Mustangs. They may find an unlikely ally in Lee Iacocca. At 74, Iacocca is out of the car business and into the business of selling electric bicycles. His advice today to owners of classic Mustangs who are concerned about safety?
And if you really want a real safe one, trade up. After 35 years, it's time to dump that old Mustang.